So the question that really still nags at me is, why didn't anybody ever tell me sooner? Why did I have to wait to hear about it until my mid-40s? You know, to quote Forrest Gump, I'm not a dumb man. I went to decent public schools, not in Texas, by the way, up north. And yet throughout my education, the central fact of human existence, of life on this earth, all life, and the implications of it, was rarely, if ever, mentioned. Ever. And the strange thing, I don't know, this is something I've been thinking about, you know, it hasn't been this way in other fields of human endeavor. I mean, from the first short plane flight on Kitty Hawk to landing on the moon, only took 66 years. From the first functional light bulb to massive electrification of urban areas just took a few decades. It's been 150 plus years, right, since origin of species. And the first description, this is how Dan Dennett describes natural selection. I love this. The central enabling process not only of life, but also of knowledge and learning and understanding. And yet most people still know little or nothing about it. It's the single most important fact about the existence of life in our world. So aren't we just like talking about it all the time? I stumbled across it accidentally. It actually happened a few years ago when I was still a working pastor. I was doing a sermon series on happiness. So I thought I'll go down to Barnes & Noble and get some books on happiness. One of the books I picked up was a book by the noted psychologist Jonathan Haidt called The Happiness Hypothesis. Very good read. And he mentioned this thing called evolutionary psychology that I had never heard of before. And I thought, wow, that is kind of cool, you know, because I was never against evolution. I mean, I kind of vaguely knew it was out there. You know, stuff changes, that's how we got here, big whoop, you know, who cares? But the concept of evolutionary psychology was just, and I'm just telling you my journey, different things are going to flip the switch for different people. But what fascinated me about that was, well, because I always thought, yeah, it's about how our hands grew to a certain length, and how we started walking upright on 2 feet and lost our body hair. But no, for the first time I started understanding, no, it's about more than just how our bodies were shaped over eons of time. Evolution shapes our psyches, and our emotions, and our hopes, and our dreams, and our aspirations, and all that stuff. And it ultimately explains why we have pyramids, and cathedrals, and symphonies, and spacecraft. It explains why Homer composed the Iliad. It explained why people went to see Shakespeare's As You Like It across the street last night. Some of the people really enjoyed the play because when they saw it, there was a massive release of neurotransmitters that made their brains happy. Other people didn't really enjoy the play all that much, but they thought attending the play would be a demonstration of genetic fitness to their dates. I'll let you finish though. So why don't we hear more about the single most important fact of life on our planet? I don't think we can blame it all on religion. Yeah, there's a lot of blame there. I also think there's been some bad marketing going on. If you went up to the random person at HEB or Starbucks and you asked them to explain natural selection in one phrase, what phrase would they use? Survival of the fittest is what they would say. After I came out as a pretty big fan of Darwin's, I received more than a few emails from puzzled old friends and acquaintances. And one went something like this: how could you exchange the beautiful, uplifting worldview of religion for the cold, heartless, brutal vision of Darwinism? Okay, and that was a letter from an educated person, fairly high up the food chain at a petrochemical firm. An educated person's understanding of Darwinism is primarily the strong survive, the weak die, end of story. There's got to be more to it than that. Nature red in tooth and claw, as Tennyson put it. Now, of course, that's a grave misunderstanding. And I'm aware that biologists don't even use the phrase survival of the fittest anymore, but I will put money on it, it is still the predominant view out there in our culture. And for many people, the word evolution then conjures up fears of social Darwinism and eugenics and all kinds of crazy distortions. As you know, survival of the fittest does not mean the victory of the strongest. That's not how natural selection works at all. It doesn't mean the biggest, baddest bully on the block wins. And we have to get that word out there. Survival of the fittest really means the survival of the most adaptable, the most flexible. That sounds better to me. I think survival of the fittest has a very scary ring to it for most people. I know it scares me. When I hear the term survival of the fittest, I think of all those insanely fit people at the gym with their rippled abs and bulging muscles and zero body fat. And if it's all about survival of the fittest, then that leaves me out. If there is some breakdown in the social order and we suddenly revert to a hunter-gatherer existence, I'm going to be one of the first ones to go. I ain't going to make it. I don't even own a gun, which you shouldn't admit in Texas, I just realized. Now, I believe it was Dr. Eugenie Scott who coined the phrase, survival of the fit enough. Now that sounds better to me. That's a lot less scary. I may not be the fittest member of the tribe, but I can do a few push-ups. And, you know, if fittest doesn't work for me, but fit enough, that sounds doable. Sounds like there might be hope for me after all. And I'm not trying to be silly here. I am dead serious. Look, it would be nice if we lived in a world that ran completely on facts. It would be nice if we could win the day on all the facts we've been sharing this afternoon. But we don't live in that world. We do not live on the set of Dragnet. Old-timers like me, do you remember the catchphrase of Sergeant Joe Friday? The facts, ma'am, just the facts. Facts are essential. Facts are fundamental. But humans also evolved to need more than facts. We need poetry. We crave poetry. Facts tend not to inspire us. They inspire some people, but they're weird. We are inspired by poetry. And as we get the word out about the wonder of evolution and the power of the scientific method, we cannot afford to be tone deaf to humanity. We need to pay attention to poetry. Marketing matters. It matters deeply. Would anybody have remembered Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech if he had said, well, I kind of sort of got this idea we could like all live together? No. Poetry matters. I can only speak for myself, but nothing, absolutely nothing, has altered the way I look at the world and experience life more than learning about evolution. And I believe a wider understanding of evolution has the potential to transform humanity. And here's just a couple of quick examples. For most of my life, I have not been much of a nature person. You know, showing me the Disney True Life adventure films as a kid did nothing for me. I hate bugs. I don't like being outside. I lived in a world of books and culture, and the kind of food I like to prepare requires way more utensils than you can take on a camp out. And my definition of roughing it is pronounced La Quinta. We don't go lower than that. And now, for the first time in my life, I kind of sort of getting the nature thing. Oh, does anyone live up on the northwest side of town, up near Willowbrook Mall? Okay, our local Starbucks at 249 in 1960 made the newspaper this week because every evening at sundown, a roost of 50,000 purple martins is swarming in the air, hovering over the Starbucks. In fact, the Audubon Society is going to have an outing there next week. And I happened to be in that area last night, and I looked out and I saw the purple martins. And it's like for the first time in life I got it. I had this sense of connection that And before Darwin, I would have just said, look at all this crap around here. And it does kind of smell bad if you go up there. But it's, the roost is so large, it's picked up on Doppler radar. You gotta go see this thing. And so now evolution has given me a framework for understanding how all living things that have ever existed on this planet are related to each other through lines of descent, and it boggles my mind. And I'm feeling a kinship for other animals that I've never known before. I still want to eat them, but yeah. Evolution has helped me put kind of human existence in its proper perspective that I didn't have before. And I think this is where marketing and terminology is important too. But still at universities, the study of things like Greco-Roman culture or Egyptian culture is called the Antiquities Department. Okay, but when you think about it in the scale of evolution, wait a second, it ain't that old. I mean, if we can still laugh at the jokes of Socrates, that means we aren't all that different from the people who lived in the time. We probably feel pretty much right at home in the age of Pericles in 5th century Athens. Actually, all of human history from 10,000 years ago until now should be referred to as modern history, I believe. Evolution teaches us that. It changes the scale. And if we want to know what makes us tick as a species, we have to continue to dig back deeper into our origins. If our children were taught in schools more rigorously about the origin of species, I just think the implications would be incredible. I think the eradication of racism, once people come to understand our common history and our origins in Africa and how once upon a time there was this bottleneck of 5,000 individuals and all of us came from that family. And when you know that fact, you can never look on another human being as anyone, as not the other. This could mean the decline of the us-them dichotomies that plague humanity. An accurate education in the origins of life would clearly show people that natural selection produced far more than a brutal competition for survival. Natural selection not only produced competition and brutality and war, but it produced things like compassion and altruism and sacrifice and, yes, even love. I heard on NPR the other day that marine biologists now say that dolphins have names. Did you hear that? They have names they call each other by, unique signals. 5 minutes. Oh. I didn't know you had the sign, Kurt. I mean, and anyone who says that animals can't show love has never owned a dog, nor should they be allowed to own a dog. So as we promote the expansion of science education and evolution, as we advocate for a more reason-based approach to reality, I think it's important that we not be afraid to get poetic, and get poetic often. And it's important that we're not afraid to talk about love. Because after all, isn't that why we're here today? I think you would not be here unless you care deeply. We're here because of our love for humanity. We're here because of our love for pursuing the truth, and our love for life itself. The sign that you are here shows that you do love deeply. Even our dear friends up in the woodlands that we got to talk to yesterday, that was important to have that contact. And I ran across this story a couple months ago, and I forgot where I found it. I think it was New York Times science section, but I think this kind of tells the story too. The Shanidar Cave in the mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan is the site of the excavation of several Neanderthal skeletons dating back to 60 to 80,000 years. The Shanidar 1 skeleton belonged to a man nearly 50 years old at the time of his death, roughly the equivalent of an 80-year-old today. He had a broken, withered right arm, a missing right hand, a damaged skull, a severe limp, and heavily worn teeth. Scientists tell us it was very unlikely that he could have provided for himself. Yet, his healed fractures show he was kept alive by his group for years after his injury. And since I've read that, I've come across similar stories from other excavations around the world, and apparently these instances have become so numerous, there is now a new subspecialty of paleoanthropology dealing specifically with the paleoanthropology of human care and how our ancestors nurtured each other and cared for the weak. It's not survival of the strongest after all. Human evolution has also been the survival of those who care for each other best. And yes, life can be brutal, and it can be hard, and it can be competitive, but if you have a few friends who will fix your broken bones and bring you food and carry you along, the journey becomes bearable, and yes, even joyful. Thanks so much for letting an English major talk to a science crowd.